The rain hammered against the narrow windows of the Queen's apartment, a cold reminder of how small Maddie Cooper's world had become. She stood in the dim kitchen, clutching the divorce papers that still smelled faintly of printer ink. No shouting, no dramatic confrontation, just silence, heavy, suffocating silence. Cole Matthews hadn't even looked at her when he signed. He simply said, "I hope you find what you're looking for," as if she was a stranger asking for directions, instead of the woman who supported him for 5 years. It was the quiet that broke her, not the words. The apartment felt foreign now, like a place she was squatting in rather than a home. The leaky faucet dripped in uneven beats, the old refrigerator hummed weakly, and somewhere outside a bus screeched to a halt. Maddie waited for the familiar wave of panic, the one that usually showed up whenever life slipped out of her control. But tonight, something else arrived instead. A numb stillness. She placed the papers on the counter, next to the cracked mug she used every morning before catching the 7 train. Her father's medical bills were stacked beside it, a leaning tower of reminders that life was already too heavy before Cole decided she wasn't enough for the life he wanted. He phrased it politely, of course. Cole always wrapped his judgment in clean, careful sentences. He never insulted Maddie outright. He simply outgrew her. Or at least, that was the story he told himself. She grabbed her worn-out tote bag, the stitching frayed from years of carrying library books, financial notebooks, and resumes she never felt brave enough to send. She had to work the late shift at the bookstore tonight. Divorce didn't pause reality. When she stepped outside, the city swallowed her in cold gray light. The wind tugged at her coat, soaked her shoes, and cut through her like she was made of paper. She kept walking, past the blinking streetlights, past the corner deli with fogged windows, past 2 teenagers laughing under a shared umbrella. Life kept going, uncaring. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "I heard about today. Meet me outside Barnes & Noble after your shift. G.H." Her stomach tightened. G.H. She didn't know anyone with those initials. At least, she didn't think she did. For a moment, she wondered if Cole had sent someone. Then she laughed under her breath. No, Cole had already moved on in everything but the legal sense. He wouldn't spare the emotional energy. Rain dripped from her hair as she boarded the train. She didn't know it yet, but this was the last night she would ever ride that route, as the Maddie everyone underestimated. Because someone she had never met was waiting in the shadows of Manhattan, holding a truth that would rewrite her entire life. And when she finally learned it, the world would no longer look down on Madeline Cooper. They would look up. The fluorescent lights inside Barnes & Noble flickered just slightly, something customers never noticed, but Maddie did. She noticed everything these days. Her shift badge hung crooked on her cardigan, and her hair, still damp from the rain, clung to her cheeks as she sorted a cart of new arrivals. To others, she looked like any other overworked New Yorker, but inside, she felt like a shell walking on autopilot. She wasn't supposed to work 3 jobs at 28. A full-time analyst, a weekend cashier, and an evening shift stocking shelves. Her friends used to joke that she had the hustle, but truthfully, it wasn't ambition. It was survival. Hospital bills didn't care about dreams, and her father's treatment required more zeros than her entire savings account. Tonight felt heavier than usual. The divorce papers had drained whatever strength was left in her bones. As she slid a hardcover biography of Eleanor Roosevelt onto the shelf, her phone buzzed again. Same unknown number, same initials, G.H. Who was he? Or worse, what did he know? She shoved the phone back into her pocket. She didn't have space in her mind for mysteries. The bookstore smelled like paper, glue, and old carpet, a familiar, oddly comforting mix. But comfort didn't erase the exhaustion tugging her eyelids down. "Maddie, break time," her manager called. She nodded, heading toward the back room. A small table and two mismatched chairs sat under a bulletin board filled with company memos. She set down her lukewarm coffee, pulled the elastic from her wrist, and retied her hair. The mirror on the wall showed someone she barely recognized. Tired eyes, pale skin, a sadness she couldn't disguise. She whispered to herself, "You're okay. You're fine." She didn't believe it. Her mind drifted to Cole. Not the man he was lately, the one obsessed with climbing corporate ladders, but the early days, when they'd shared cheap takeout on the floor of their first apartment. When he used to tell her, "You're the smartest person I know, Maddie." She used to carry those words like armor. Now they felt like a lie he didn't even remember telling. She checked the clock. Break over. Back on the floor, her hands moved automatically. Unpack, scan, shelve, while her thoughts spiraled. The city outside glowed against the wet pavement, headlights streaking like white ribbons. New York never paused. It didn't pity people like her. It swallowed them whole. When the announcement finally echoed through the store, "We're closing in 10, Maddie felt her shoulders sag with relief. Her feet ached, her fingers were numb from cardboard, and her heart felt bruised from a day she wished she could erase. She stepped outside into the crisp night air, breath forming a faint cloud. The city hummed, neon against darkness. She tightened her coat and scanned the sidewalk. That's when she saw him. A tall man in a charcoal coat, standing perfectly still beneath the street lamp. He wasn't a customer. He wasn't a stranger who stumbled by. He was waiting. For her. When their eyes met, he spoke first. "Madeline Cooper, we need to talk." Everything inside her went still. This night, already heavy, was about to break open. The man didn't move when Maddie instinctively stepped back. The yellow street lamp above him cast long shadows across the wet sidewalk, turning his figure into something carved out of night. His coat was tailored, expensive in a way she couldn't quite name. The kind of fabric you only saw on people who lived in penthouses with glass walls and views of Central Park. But his expression wasn't cold. It was searching. "Who are you?" Maddie asked, clutching her tote bag tighter. He raised his hands slightly, as if approaching a frightened animal. "My name is Grant Harrison. I'm not here to scare you." Her pulse kicked. Harrison. The name meant nothing to her, but the way he said it, as if it held weight, made her chest tighten. She glanced around. Barnes & Noble was closing behind her, lights shutting off row by row. The sidewalk, usually busy, felt strangely empty. "I think you have the wrong person," she said, voice steadier than she felt. "No," he replied softly. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." He reached into his coat, not quickly enough to alarm her, but cautiously, and pulled out a folded envelope. He extended it toward her, rain misting through the air between them. "This belonged to your mother." Maddie froze. "My mother?" Her voice cracked just barely. Grant nodded. "She made arrangements years ago, for when the time was right." For a moment, all she heard was the distant echo of a taxi honking on Northern Boulevard. The smell of damp concrete filled her lungs. Her mother's face flashed in her mind, gentle eyes, tired hands, the way she always whispered, "You're stronger than you think, baby." Maddie shook her head. "My mother didn't have anything." She worked double shifts until the day she couldn't finish. Grant swallowed. eyes softening. Your mother had far more than she allowed you to know. He offered the envelope again. The paper looked old, the edges slightly worn. Her name was written on the front in familiar handwriting, her mother's handwriting. Her fingers trembled as she took it. "Why now?" she whispered. "Because you're alone," Grant said quietly. "And because someone should have been here for you long before tonight." A gust of wind swept down the block, lifting her hair and sending a shiver through her coat. She didn't know this man. She didn't trust Easy. She had learned that the hard way. But something in his face, an ache, a truth she didn't understand yet, held her still. "How did you find me?" she asked. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I've been searching for years. Your mother kept you hidden for reasons I'll explain. But when your divorce filing showed up in a public record today, I knew you might need help." Her heart hammered. "You read my divorce record?" "Not to invade your privacy," he said quickly. "To make sure you didn't fall through the cracks the way your mother feared." She looked down at the envelope, rain dotting the surface. "Madeline," Grant said gently, "you deserve to know who you really are." And then he spoke the sentence that stole the breath from her lungs. "You're a Harrison, and nothing about your life is what you think it is." Everything around her seemed to tilt. Her job, her father's bills, her marriage, her identity. Nothing was solid anymore. Nothing at all. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. Maddie held it the way someone might hold a relic, carefully, trembling slightly, afraid that opening it would unravel the last bit of stability she had left. Grant didn't speak. He simply stood there, calm beneath the dim streetlight, as if he'd been preparing for this moment far longer than she had been living it. With a shaky breath, she slid her thumb under the seal. Inside was a single handwritten letter. Her mother's handwriting, gentle curves, soft pressure, ink slightly smudged in a few places, hit her like a physical blow. "My Maddie, if you're reading this, it means you are old enough and strong enough to hear the truth I protected you from." The words blurred for a moment as tears stung her eyes. "Your father loved you, but he was not my only connection. You have another family, one with power, reach, and danger attached. I hid you from it, not to keep you small, but to keep you safe." Maddie's breath caught. "Safe? From what?" She kept reading. "Your biological grandfather built Harrison Aviation, a corporation far bigger than anything your father or I ever touched. When I left that world to raise you quietly, I made the hardest choice of my life." Grant shifted beside her. She could feel the weight of his gaze, waiting. "There are people who would have wanted to use you, claim you, mold you. That is why I disappeared from their world, and why I never told you. But Grant, my son, your brother, has spent years trying to find you." Maddie's head snapped up. "Brother?" she whispered. Grant exhaled, a small, restrained nod. "Half-brother, technically. But yes. If Grant is the one giving you this letter, then he has found you at the moment you need him most. Do not push him away. He will protect you in ways I no longer can." Maddie's heart twisted. She could almost hear her mother's warm voice, almost feel her touch. But one line near the bottom froze her completely. "You are the legal heir to my shares in Harrison Aviation. They belong to you now. I pray you use them not for revenge, but for the life you deserve." Air drained from Maddie's lungs. Shares? Air? Her? The girl who stocked books, counted pennies, and lived in a cramped apartment with peeling paint. The girl who was told she wasn't enough. Her voice cracked as she looked at Grant. This can't be real. It is. His tone was quiet but firm. You're not just part of this family, Maddie. You're a majority stakeholder. The board doesn't even know yet. She shook her head, stepping back. No, I'm nobody. I'm barely holding my life together. Grant's expression softened, but there was steel behind it. You're not nobody. You were hidden. There's a difference. The city hummed around them, traffic hissing through puddles, the air thick with the smell of rain and asphalt. But Maddie felt suspended outside of time. For the first time in her life, the ground beneath her didn't feel weak. It felt like it was shifting. Something vast, dangerous, unpredictable, and hers. Come with me, Grant said gently. There's more you need to know, and more people who need to know you. She didn't move, not yet, because everything she ever believed about herself had just cracked open. The rain had slowed to a thin mist, soft enough that it clung to Maddie's eyelashes like dew. She stood frozen beneath the street lamp, Grant's presence anchoring her to a reality she wasn't ready to accept. The letter trembled in her hands, the ink from her mother's signature threatening to run as raindrops melted into the page. Why didn't she tell me sooner? Maddie whispered, voice cracking under the weight of 1,000 unasked questions. Grant stepped closer, not enough to overwhelm her, just enough that she felt less alone on the empty sidewalk. Your mother was trying to keep you safe. Harrison Aviation isn't just a company. It's a battlefield. The kind you weren't supposed to grow up fighting in. Maddie shook her head. Safe from what? I was stocking books 2 hours ago, Grant. No one knows my name. That's exactly why you survived unnoticed, he replied quietly. Some people in our world, they don't handle threats gracefully. Even threats who don't know they're threats. Her stomach twisted. The bookstore, the subway, the cramped apartment. Those were her normal. She didn't have room in her life for shadows, or corporate enemies, or brothers she never knew existed. She hugged the letter to her chest. I can't be who you think I am. Grant studied her, not with judgment, but with a kind of patience she hadn't felt from anyone in months. You don't have to be anything right now, but you deserve to know what was taken from you, and what still belongs to you. He reached into his coat again and pulled out a plain black key card. Only a small silver emblem, wings surrounding the letter H, decorated the surface. This is access to the private elevator at Harrison Tower, he said. The boardroom, your mother's old office, and yours, if you ever want it. Maddie let out a weak laugh, part disbelief, part fear. My office? Grant, I don't even own matching dishware. You own 43% of one of the largest aviation empires in the country, he corrected. Dishware is optional. She stared at the key card, its sleek edges reflecting the glow from the street lamp. It felt like holding a ticket to a world where every door had been locked her entire life, until now. But stepping into that world meant stepping out of everything she knew, her job, her father's care, her quiet survival. And Cole. Even the pain he caused seemed small now compared to this. Grant, she said softly. Why me? Why now? Because you just lost the thing you spent years building, he answered. And you deserve the chance to build something bigger than anything Cole ever imagined. The words hit her harder than she expected. She closed her eyes, breathing in the cold night air. For once, the ache in her chest wasn't only heartbreak. It was something else. Possibility. Dangerous. Terrifying. real. Grant extended his hand, not demanding, simply offering. Let me show you where you come from. Maddie didn't take his hand. Not yet. But she didn't walk away either. The city felt sharper as Maddie walked toward the subway station, Grant keeping a respectful distance at her side. The rain clouds had thinned, leaving the pavement slick and reflecting the lights of passing taxis like shards of gold. Every step echoed with her heartbeat, too fast, too loud, too heavy. Her legs felt weak, as if her body couldn't decide whether to run or collapse. Grant didn't rush her. He walked slowly, hands in his coat pockets, as if this were an ordinary evening and not the unraveling of everything she once believed. Halfway down the block, her breath hitched. I need a second, she murmured, gripping the railing outside a closed bakery. Grant stopped instantly. Of course. She pressed a hand to her forehead. The world wasn't spinning, but it felt detached, like she was watching herself from outside her own skin. A billionaire empire, a family she never knew, a brother who found her through a public divorce record, and a mother who hid an entire life to protect her. Her voice came out small. This is too much. Grant didn't offer cliches. He didn't tell her she'd be fine. He just said, "You've carried bigger burdens alone." She laughed breathlessly. That's the problem. I've always carried them alone. Her father's failing health, rent, bills, Cole's expectations, Cole's disappointment, Cole's slow, polished rejection of the life she worked so hard to hold together. The thought of him brought a familiar ache, but for the first time, something fierce rose beneath it. A spark, a refusal. Does he know? She asked suddenly. Grant tilted his head. Cole? Yes. Her jaw tightened. About any of this? Grant shook his head. No. Your mother kept everything sealed. Harrison Aviation has enemies, Maddie. If Cole had known, someone else would have known, and that could have been dangerous. Dangerous. The word settled uneasily in her stomach. I'm nobody, she said quietly. Why would anyone find me threatening? Because, Grant said, meeting her eyes, you're the legal majority shareholder of an empire worth billions. That makes you the most powerful person in our family's company, even more powerful than me. Her throat tightened. I didn't ask for that. I know, he said gently, but life doesn't wait for us to feel ready. She looked away, watching headlights streak across the wet asphalt. A group of college students hurried past, laughing, carrying boxes of pizza. Normal life. Harmless life. A life she could still pretend belonged to her if she turned around right now and walked away. But she didn't. Her fingers curled around the letter again. The edges were soft from rain, the ink slightly blurred. Her mother's handwriting felt like a hand on her shoulder, guiding her. Maddie, Grant said quietly, this isn't about claiming power. It's about reclaiming what was supposed to be yours. A long silence settled between them. Finally, she straightened, wiping rain from her cheeks, though she wasn't sure if it was rain at all anymore. Okay, she whispered. Show me. Grant exhaled in visible relief. Then everything changes tonight. Maddie didn't know what she was stepping into, but for the first time in years, maybe ever, she wasn't stepping alone. The Harrison Tower didn't look real, not to someone like Maddie. It rose into the Manhattan sky like a blade of glass and steel, its edges catching the city lights and splitting them into shimmering fragments. Cars passed in streams behind her, horns echoing off marble facades. People in tailored coats and shiny shoes hurried along the sidewalk with purpose. But Maddie stood still, rooted, overwhelmed, and suddenly aware of the thrift store coat wrapped around her shoulders. "This is yours?" she murmured. Grant gave a faint smile. "It's ours, whether you step inside or not." A doorman in a Navy uniform opened the door before she could decide. "Good evening, Mr. Harrison." Grant nodded, but Maddie froze. Everyone knew him. Everyone recognized him. And her, no one even glanced twice. Inside the lobby, everything felt impossibly polished. White marble floors, a sweeping staircase, brass fixtures that reflected every flicker of movement. The air smelled faintly of citrus and clean linen, like a luxury hotel rather than an office building. She swallowed hard. "Grant, I don't belong here." "You belong here more than I do," he said. "Your mother was the rightful heir long before I came along." Her steps echoed as they crossed the lobby toward a private elevator guarded by 2 security officers. One scanned Grant's ID. The other scanned Maddie from head to toe, not rudely, but with curiosity. "She's with me," Grant said. The guard nodded, but when Maddie stepped in, the elevator didn't move. "It doesn't recognize her yet," Grant said softly. He pulled out a sleek black keycard, hers, and held it to the panel. A soft chime, a green light. Then the elevator surged upward, slicing through floors so fast Maddie felt her ears pop. The city shrank beneath her through the glass wall behind them. Her reflection stared back, tired, confused, trying to hold herself together. But for the first time, something new glimmered there. Fear, yes, but also curiosity. "What's on the top floor?" she asked. Grant didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was calm, but heavy. "Power." The elevator doors opened to a hallway with walls of smoked glass and soft, recessed lighting. The air felt different up here, quiet, charged, like standing backstage before a performance that could change the entire course of a life. Grant guided her to a pair of tall, double doors. "Your mother's office," he said. Her breath caught. It felt wrong to enter. It felt wrong not to. Maddie pushed the doors open. The room was enormous, lined with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. A massive walnut desk sat centered atop a woven rug. A vase of dried lavender, preserved, untouched, sat in one corner. The scent hit her instantly. Her mother used to tuck lavender under her pillow when she couldn't sleep. Her fingers brushed the desk. She imagined her mother sitting here, making decisions that shaped entire industries, while Maddie believed they were just surviving paycheck to paycheck. It made her chest ache. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. Grant stepped beside her. "You don't have to know today, but you will." The city glittered outside like scattered stars, and for the first time, standing in her mother's office, Maddie realized something. Her life wasn't falling apart. It was widening. Maddie woke the next morning inside a world that still didn't feel real. She stood before the tall windows of the guest suite Grant arranged for her, 40 floors above Manhattan, wrapped in soft morning light. The city buzzed far below, horns, sirens, the hum of thousands of lives moving with purpose. But today, for the first time, she wasn't just watching the city. She was part of it. Grant had told her to meet him at Harrison Tower at 9 sharp. Not for a ceremony, not for a welcome, but for training. "You can't inherit a kingdom and not learn how to run it," he'd said. So she walked into the tower wearing the only professional outfit she owned, a simple black dress, pressed as best as she could, paired with shoes that pinched her toes. Everyone who passed her seemed frighteningly polished. Pressed suits, glossy hair, confidence in every step. She felt like an imposter in a museum of power. Grant met her in the executive wing, already reviewing documents on a sleek tablet. "You ready?" he asked. "No," she answered honestly. He smiled. "Good. That means you're going to try." He led her to a conference room where two people waited inside, a woman in a navy suit and a man wearing thin silver glasses. The table before them held a stack of binders, a laptop, and 3 cups of untouched black coffee. "This is Elena Maxton," Grant introduced. "Chief Operating Officer. She'll handle your orientation." Elena shook Maddie's hand with firm confidence. "We're rebuilding several branches. You're stepping in at a crucial time." "And this is Dr. James Riker," Grant continued, "Head of Analytics. He'll evaluate your instincts." Maddie blinked. "Evaluate?" Riker smiled faintly. "Think of it as stress testing. We need to know how you react under pressure, financial, ethical, and structural." Her stomach dropped. "I'm not qualified for this." Elena slid a binder toward her. "That's what training is for. You're not stepping into a CEO role. You're stepping into your right. We'll build the skills together." Grant watched her carefully, as if gauging her courage second by second. The next hours were a whirlwind. Financial case studies, crisis simulations, notes on leadership dynamics, even a mock presentation in front of Elena and Riker, her voice trembling as she explained market projections she barely understood. Each time she fumbled, Elena corrected her without softness. Each time she doubted, Riker asked, "What does your instinct say?" Each time she hesitated, Grant reassured her with one quiet nod. By noon, her brain felt like a tangled wire. "I can't do this," she whispered, rubbing her temples. Grant placed a bottle of water beside her. "You did do it. Not perfectly, not confidently, but you did it." Elena added, "I've seen legacy heirs who walked in thinking they deserved the world. They failed. You're teachable." Maddie looked between them, breath unsteady. "Why does everyone think I'm worth this?" Grant's answer was instant. "Because you are." As they wrapped up for the day, Elena handed her a card with tomorrow's schedule, packed, demanding, unforgiving. "You'll grow into this, Madeline," Elena said. "Not because of your name, because of your grit." Maddie stepped into the hallway, feeling something unfamiliar rising inside her. Not fear, not shock. Drive. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was becoming. By the end of her first week of training, Maddie's body moved like she was wading through invisible weights. Her mornings started before sunrise. Her nights ended long after the office lights dimmed to a low glow. She wasn't just tired. She was stretched, pushed into a world with teeth. But she didn't break, not even once. She carried binders larger than her entire college textbooks combined. She memorized market cycles, aviation history, fuel hedging strategies, and leadership protocols. She practiced negotiation scenarios until her voice cracked. Every night, when she dragged herself into the guest suite, her head throbbed with information she never imagined she could understand. Yet something inside her, a small ember, burned brighter each day. On Friday afternoon, Elena called her into the smaller conference room, the one with clean, gray walls and a glass table that reflected every insecurity she brought into the room. "Sit," Elena instructed, tapping her Mont Blanc pen against a document. "Today we're going to simulate your first board briefing." Maddie felt her pulse spike. "Already?" Yes, Dr. Riker said from the corner, flipping open a laptop. You learn by doing. A large screen flickered to life behind Maddie, displaying charts, projections, and competitor analyses. Elena slid a printed deck toward her. You have 10 minutes, she said. Present to us as if we're the board. 10 minutes. A heartbeat. Or a century. Maddie stood, smoothing her dress with clammy palms. Her voice trembled on the first line. She stumbled on a statistic. Her throat tightened as Elena's expression remained unreadable, and Riker typed notes silently. Halfway through, she lost her place. Her vision blurred, her stomach twisted. She gripped the table to steady herself, humiliated, certain she had just ruined the fragile progress she'd made. I'm sorry, she whispered. The room was still for a long moment. Then Elena set down her pen. You regroup. Start from the beginning. I failed, Maddie said weakly. You faltered, Elena corrected. Failing is refusing to continue. Start again. Riker folded his arms. Let's see if you learned from the first attempt. Something shifted inside her then, small but unmistakable. A refusal to give up. A quiet, steadying inhale. She began again. This time her voice didn't tremble. Her sentences came out clearer. Her eyes stayed forward. The numbers made sense. The strategy aligned. Her instincts sharpened. When she finished, a heavy silence filled the room. Riker finally spoke. Your instinct is solid. Raw, unpolished, but solid. Elena nodded. You'll need discipline, refinement, and confidence, but you have the foundation. A foundation. Her. Madeline Cooper, who once balanced bills on the back of grocery receipts. Grant entered just then, pausing in the doorway as he overheard. How did she do? He asked. Elena looked at Maddie, then at Grant. She's better than you were on week 1. Grant grinned. I knew it. Maddie felt heat rise to her cheeks. Surprise, pride, disbelief tangled together. As the session ended, Elena gathered her papers. Be ready. Word is spreading across the building. People are asking who you are. A chill ran down Maddie's spine. People were watching. People were noticing. Not the struggling woman at Barnes & Noble. Not the wife who signed her divorce with shaking hands. But someone rising, someone dangerous. Someone they would soon learn not to underestimate. By Monday morning, the atmosphere inside Harrison Tower felt different, charged, humming, alive with whispers Maddie couldn't decipher. She felt the shift the moment she stepped out of the elevator onto the executive floor. People she'd never met glanced at her with curiosity, some with confusion, others with a cautious kind of respect. Last week, she was invisible. Today, the air bent slightly around her presence. She wasn't sure whether to feel empowered or terrified. Grant walked beside her, reviewing emails on his tablet. Don't take the whispers personally. Rumors spread in corporate spaces before facts do. What rumors? She asked. He didn't look up. That a new investor has arrived. That Elena is grooming someone. That the board doesn't know something they should. It doesn't matter which version they believe. It only matters that your name is entering rooms you haven't stepped into yet. The idea made her stomach twist. As they approached the strategy wing, Maddie overheard a pair of analysts. Who's the new girl? Some consultant, I think. No, I heard she's connected to the CEO. Impossible. Harrison never brings in outsiders. The last statement hit her unexpectedly hard. Outsider. It was the one thing she'd spent her whole life being. Grant opened the glass door to the training room. Ready for round 2? Not even a little, she muttered. Inside, Elena had already set up a new simulation, this one more brutal than the last. Crisis management, negative press, a model predicting fuel shortages. Maddie faced scenario after scenario, pushed to adapt faster than her brain could process. By lunchtime, she could barely feel her legs. "You're improving," Riker said as he reviewed her latest decisions. "It doesn't feel like it," she replied.
That's because improvement rarely does.
Before she could respond, Elena stepped into the room, closing the door behind her with a soft click. "Maddie," she said, "I need you to hear something." Grant straightened. "What's wrong?" Elena crossed her arms. "Word reached us from Matthews Tech." Maddie's breath caught. "Cole's company." "What word?" she asked slowly. Elena hesitated before speaking, something she almost never did. "Cole's been talking. Boasting, actually." Maddie's pulse thudded. "About what?" "That he's moving up," Elena said. "That his personal life is settled, and he's free from any dead weight that held him back." The words hit like a blow she didn't expect to feel anymore. Grant stiffened. "Dead weight?" "His phrase," Elena confirmed. "He used it in a meeting, loudly." Heat crept up Maddie's neck, not embarrassment, not sadness, something sharper.
"I don't care what he thinks," she said quickly, too quickly. Elena's gaze softened slightly.
"You don't have to. But this kind of arrogance tends to catch up with people, especially when the board at Matthews Tech will soon learn that the woman he dismissed has ties to Harrison Aviation." Grant added, "You being here will have consequences he didn't anticipate." Maddie swallowed, hard. "I didn't come here for revenge." "No," Elena agreed. "But sometimes justice has its own timing." The room felt smaller suddenly, the possibilities around her bigger, more dangerous, more real. Riker closed his laptop gently. "This is the moment, Maddie, when your old life collides with your new one." She looked at the windows overlooking the skyline, New York stretching far into the horizon. Collision, yes. And for the first time, she wouldn't be the one breaking.
By Wednesday, the whispers around Harrison Tower had evolved into something more pointed. People no longer wondered merely who Maddie was. They wanted to know why she was being trained by the highest-ranking executives in the building. She felt their eyes follow her as she walked through the corridors with her binder pressed to her chest. She had lived her entire life trying not to take up space. Now she couldn't avoid it. Grant noticed it before she even said a word. "You're tense," he said as they entered the executive strategy room. "I'm being stared at like I'm a glitch in the system." His expression didn't soften. "Good. Glitches disrupt old programming." Before she could answer, Elena stepped inside with her usual calm precision. "We're moving to the next level of training today." Riker followed with a tablet in hand. Matthews Tech just released a quarterly preview, And their projections don't add up.
Maddie blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means," Elena said as she placed a folder in front of her, "you're going to find the flaw." "What flaw?" Grant stepped forward. "The one Cole signed off on." Her heart dropped, but not from fear. From something colder. She opened the folder. Numbers filled the page, columns of projected revenue, growth charts, budgets, cost cycles. At first glance, it all looked consistent, but she had spent the past week immersed in aviation economics and analytics, absorbing more data than she'd ever processed in her life. So she looked closer, and then she saw it. A tiny inconsistency in a growth model. A decimal where there shouldn't be one. A pattern that repeated incorrectly every third line. Her breath stilled. "This is wrong," she said quietly. "Like, significantly wrong." "How wrong?" Riker asked. She traced the numbers with her fingertip. "If these projections go public as is, Matthew's tech will look stronger than they are. Investors will pour money into a false climb, and when the real numbers surface, they crash," Elena finished. "Hard." Grant watched her. "And the person who approved those numbers?" Maddie's throat tightened. "Cole." "Exactly." Riker tapped his tablet. "If this goes uncorrected, Matthew's tech is heading into a scandal. If it gets corrected, someone takes the blame." "And either way," Elena said, folding her arms, "your ex-husband is standing on a trap door he accidentally built himself." Maddie felt an unexpected swirl of emotions: shock, disbelief, and, disturbingly, fairness. Cole hadn't created this mistake out of malice. He'd created it because he always rushed to appear smarter, faster, more prepared than he actually was. He ignored details. He dismissed caution. He wanted prestige, not accuracy. "This wasn't intentional," Maddie murmured. "No," Elena agreed. "But consequences rarely care about intent." Maddie swallowed. "So what happens now?" Grant looked at her as if the answer was obvious. "You tell us." Her breath caught. "Me?" "This is your first real power test," he said. "You found the flaw. You understand its weight, and only you can decide whether to expose it, ignore it, or escalate it." Her hands grew cold. This wasn't just training anymore. This was impact. This was the moment her old life overlapped with the power she never asked for. Riker leaned back. "Whatever you choose will echo in this company, in Matthew's tech, and in the life you're building." Maddie stared at the flawed numbers. This wasn't revenge. This was accountability. And for the first time, she held the scale. Maddie stared at the numbers in the report until the ink almost blurred. The conference room felt colder than usual, the hum of the ventilation sharp against her ears. She had never been in a position where a single choice of hers could ripple through two massive companies and through someone's life, especially his life. Cole. His name no longer brought the sting it once did, but it carried weight, a familiar ache, a reminder of the years she spent shrinking so he could feel taller. Grant leaned against the glass wall, arms crossed. Elena paced slowly, her heels tapping in steady rhythm. Riker watched her like she was a puzzle only she could solve. "You're quiet," Elena observed. "I'm thinking," Maddie whispered. "Good," Riker replied. "Think harder." She traced the flawed projection again. It wasn't a tiny mistake. It was catastrophic. If investors bought into this, Matthew's tech would soar briefly, then collapse. And when the collapse came, careers would shatter, not just Cole's, but those of the analysts under him, the junior employees who worked late nights, just like she once did. "This affects more than him," Maddie said softly. "That's true," Grant replied, "but it doesn't change the fact that the flaw is there." "What if I warn them privately," she offered, "without causing a scandal?" Elena shook her head. "Boards care about accountability. If you warn them quietly, the company might bury the mistake and keep running with misleading data. That would make you complicit." The word landed like ice in her chest. Complicit. "And if I expose it?" she asked. "Matthew's tech will have to issue a correction," Riker said. "Their stock will dip. Their board will demand an explanation." "And Cole?" she asked, though she already knew. Grant sighed. "He'll take the fall. The person who signs off always does." She looked back at the report. The ink suddenly felt heavier than lead. Her entire life, she played small to avoid hurting anyone. She stayed quiet. She stayed soft. She stayed safe. But this wasn't about vindictiveness. It was about truth. Grant stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Maddie, look at me." She did. "You are not responsible for shielding someone from the consequences of their own arrogance." She swallowed hard. "Even if I cared for him once?" "Especially then," Grant said, "because you know better than anyone how he operates. Cole doesn't learn unless the world forces him to." Elena added, "And the world is about to." Silence settled over the room, a silence that demanded clarity, not comfort. Maddie exhaled slowly. "I'll escalate it to the regulatory committee," she said. "Not to destroy him, but because it's the right thing for the industry and for every employee who depends on truthful reporting." Elena nodded with approval. Riker typed something quickly. Grant looked at her with something like pride. But Maddie's hands shook faintly. "You just made your first executive decision," Elena said, "and you made it well." Maddie wasn't sure how she felt, relieved, terrified, strangely powerful. One thing was certain. A fault line had been drawn. And when the consequences began to unfold, her old life and Cole's would never be untouched again. By Friday morning, the regulatory committee had received Maddie's report. She knew because Elena slipped a brief email printout onto her desk with a simple line, "Acknowledged, under review." No signatures, no names. Just the quiet beginning of a storm. But storms in corporate America rarely arrive loudly. They start with a shift in tone, a whisper in a hallway, a paused conversation when someone walks by. And this morning, the whispers had a name: Cole Matthews. Maddie walked through the executive floor with her binder against her chest, pretending she didn't hear fragments of conversations. Matthews' tech's projections aren't adding up. Someone flagged a major discrepancy. If that blows up during their pre-IPO season, God help them. Each word slid under her skin, cold and electric. Grant met her outside the analytics wing. "You holding up?" She forced a breath. "I didn't expect it to spread this fast." "It didn't spread," he corrected. "It leaked, and not from us." A ripple of unease ran through her. Meaning what? "Someone inside Matthews Tech is panicking," Grant explained. "These things only leak when someone fears being caught." Her stomach twisted. She knew Cole's patterns better than anyone. He never admitted mistakes. He hid them under charm, speed, and noise. If he suspected the numbers were in jeopardy, he'd scramble to protect his image. Riker appeared in the doorway. "You'll want to see this." He led them into the small analysis room, where a live financial update played on a wall-mounted screen. A business journalist spoke in a crisp, urgent tone. "Unusual fluctuations seen in Matthews Tech's projected performance models. Experts say early indicators show inconsistencies. Board members have declined to comment." Maddie's heart sank. This wasn't quiet. It was escalating. Elena entered behind them, eyes sharp. "We need to prep. If the board at Matthews Tech contacts us, we must be transparent about the data trail." Maddie swallowed. "Does Cole know yet?" "Oh, he knows," Elena replied. "Trust me." As if on cue, Maddie's phone buzzed. Unknown number. No, not unknown. Just a number she had deleted. Cole. Her chest tightened as she stepped into the hallway to answer. The moment she picked up, his voice burst through, loud, frantic, cracking around the edges. Maddie, what did you do? She closed her eyes for a beat. I did the right thing. You reported my department? He demanded. Do you have any idea what you've triggered? This isn't about you, she said quietly. It's about the truth in the numbers. You're ruining everything. No, she cut in, firmer this time. I'm correcting something that could hurt hundreds of employees. You should have seen the flaw, Cole. His breath hitched. A second of silence, then a bitter laugh. You think you're someone important now? Maddie, you're... She didn't let him finish because she didn't need to hear the old script. I'm not the woman you walked away from, she said softly. And I'm not responsible for cleaning up your shortcuts anymore. Before he could respond, she ended the call. Her hand shook, not from fear, but from something new. Resolve. Strength she didn't know she had. When she walked back into the analysis room, Grant met her eyes. You did the right thing, he said. But the truth was bigger and heavier. For the first time, Maddie hadn't broken under pressure. She had become the pressure. By the next morning, the financial world was buzzing. Matthews Tech tried to control the damage. Their PR team issued a vague statement about a technical data misalignment, but the markets weren't convinced. Analysts on morning shows were already dissecting every inconsistency. Investors were asking hard questions. And Cole was calling non-stop.
Maddie silenced her phone, placing it face down on the conference table as she prepared for another training session with Elena and Riker. But Grant entered the room before they could begin, holding a crisp ivory envelope sealed with gold foil. He set it in front of Maddie, her eyebrows pulled together. What's this? Open it, Grant said. She carefully broke the seal. Inside was an embossed card that made her breath catch. The annual Manhattan Innovation Gala, hosted at the Plaza Hotel. Dress code, black tie. Guest category, executive, invite only. Name on the card, Madeline Cooper Harrison. Her throat tightened. This must be a mistake. Elena shook her head. No mistake. Your presence was requested. Requested by who? Grant slid his hands into his pockets. The board wants to meet the heir. Maddie nearly dropped the invitation. No, I'm not ready for this.
I barely give board presentations in training. How am I supposed to walk into a room full of CEOs, investors, and global press? Riker looked up from his laptop. By remembering you belonged there more than half of them. She shook her head. Grant, I can't go. You can, he said calmly. And you should. It's going to be a circus, she whispered, especially with the Matthews Tech scandal. Elena exchanged a glance with Grant. That's exactly why you must attend. Grant sat across from her. Listen, the gala is where the financial elite gather before year-end reporting. It's where narratives are shaped. If you show up, the story becomes, the new Harrison heir steps into the spotlight. If you hide, people will craft their own story for you. Maddie pressed her hands to her eyes. And what if Cole is there? Grant's voice cooled.
Then he'll see with his own eyes the woman he failed to value.
Riker added, perception is power. This is your moment to shape how the world sees you. But Maddie wasn't thinking about power. She was thinking about survival. She remembered all the nights she swept bookstore floors, the subway rides home at midnight, the $3 dinners, the tears she hid from everyone, including herself. I don't fit in places like that, she said quietly. Grant leaned forward, voice steady. Maddie, every person in that ballroom plays a role. Some flaunt power, some chase it, some fake it. But very few actually have it. He tapped the invitation. You do. Her breath wavered. You don't have to say anything, Elena said gently.
Your presence alone changes the dynamic. Riker added, and for what it's worth, I've seen legacies built on far less courage than you've shown this week. The room fell quiet. Maddie traced her name embossed in gold, her mother's name in her own, a name she had never used, a name she wasn't sure she was ready to wear. Finally, she whispered, When is the gala? Grant exhaled, relief blended with pride. Tomorrow night. Tomorrow. Everything inside her tightened. Tomorrow her two worlds would collide, publicly, irrevocably, and in front of everyone who ever doubted her. The day of the gala arrived with a tension Maddie could feel in her bones. Manhattan was unusually crisp, the kind of winter evening where the city lights shimmered like cold jewels. She spent the morning in back-to-back briefings with Elena, then a final strategy check with Grant, though she barely absorbed a word. Her mind spun in loops. The Plaza Hotel, crowds, press, coal, and somewhere buried beneath all that, her mother's name on that invitation. By late afternoon, she stood in the boutique suite Grant had arranged for her inside Harrison Tower, surrounded by stylists, tailors, and soft murmurs of lift your chin and turn your wrist. She felt oddly detached from her own body, like she was watching someone else being prepared for a life she still didn't believe belonged to her. The gown chosen for her wasn't flashy. Grant insisted on that. Midnight blue, structured at the shoulders, with a clean lines that made her look taller, sharper, more certain. A subtle elegance. Power whispered, not shouted. When they stepped back, one of the stylists gasped softly. Grant entered just then. He froze. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Maddie, he said finally, you look like someone the world should pay attention to. She swallowed. I don't feel like that person. You don't have to feel it, he replied gently. You just have to walk into the room. Her hands trembled as she slipped into her heels. Grant offered his arm. Ready? No, she said honestly. But she still took his arm. When they arrived at Teterboro Airport, Maddie nearly stopped breathing. A sleek black Gulfstream G700 waited on the runway, its polished surface reflecting the runway lights like a mirror. The engines hummed softly, calm, controlled power. For the gala? She whispered. For you, Grant corrected. The board insisted. She stepped inside. The cabin was a world of cream leather and glowing warm lighting. She sank into a seat, gripping the armrest as the jet lifted into the night sky. Manhattan glittered beneath her like a map of possibilities she'd never dared to imagine. 10 minutes later, the jet touched down at a private pad just blocks from the plaza. Waiting outside was a line of black Mercedes S-Class cars. One pulled forward. The driver opened the door for her. As Maddie stepped out, she felt the city hold its breath. People turned. Some whispered, some stared openly. Camera flashes began, soft at first, then relentless. Grant leaned toward her. This is your moment. They don't know who you are yet. They don't know what you've been through. But they will. Her pulse hammered. The plaza's golden archway rose before her, glowing under the winter sky. The carpet stretched out like a path toward a future she wasn't sure she was ready for, but couldn't avoid. Then she heard it, a voice she knew, a voice she used to love. Maddie? She turned. Cole stood frozen at the entrance, stunned, pale, eyes wide with disbelief. Sienna beside him looked like she'd swallowed ice. For the first time in her life, Maddie didn't shrink. She lifted her chin and walked straight past them
into the light. The moment Maddie stepped into the grand ballroom of the plaza, the world sharpened around her. The chandeliers above rained light down like liquid gold, catching on crystal glasses, metallic gowns, and the glittering skyline framed through tall, arched windows. Music drifted from a live quartet, soft, elegant, expensive. But nothing was louder than the sudden shift in the room. Conversations faltered. Eyes followed her, not with disdain, but with curiosity, calculation, recognition of someone important. Grant walked at her side, posture straight, expression unreadable. He wasn't escorting her. He was presenting her. And she felt it.
"Maddie," he murmured, "remember, don't rush. Power moves slowly." She nodded, though her pulse pounded. Each step felt heavy and surreal, like she was stepping through someone else's dream. A pair of executives approached, older men with tailored suits and names she'd only ever seen in business articles.
"Grant," one said warmly, "you didn't tell us you were bringing a guest." Grant smiled politely.
"I didn't bring a guest. I brought my sister."
Maddie inhaled sharply. There it was, out loud, in public. The men blinked, startled, but only for a second. Then their eyes sharpened with new interest.
"The Harrison heir," one murmured under his breath.
But before they could ask questions, more guests drifted closer, forming a quiet circle of curiosity. Maddie felt the walls closing in, not threateningly, but with weight she hadn't expected. "Do you want to step outside?" Grant whispered.
"No," she whispered back. "I need to stand here." Because she wasn't the girl from Queens tonight. She wasn't the woman Cole dismissed. She was someone the entire room was recalibrating around. But the universe couldn't resist a test. "Maddie?" She turned. Cole stood a few feet away, looking at her as though he'd seen a ghost. Sienna hovered behind him, her smile tight and brittle. "Maddie," Cole repeated, voice unsteady. What is all this?" Her heartbeat didn't spike this time. Her voice didn't tremble. "It's my life," she said simply. Cole swallowed hard. You came in a jet? Harrison Aviation? You're with them now?" Grant stepped forward slightly, protective. "She's not with us. She is us." Cole's face drained of color. Sienna stiffened, scanning Maddie's gown, her confidence, her presence. "You didn't tell anyone you had connections like this." Maddie met her gaze calmly. "I didn't know." Cole tried to laugh, but it cracked. "So what? You're suddenly important?"
The old Maddie would have shrunk. This Maddie didn't move. "I didn't suddenly become anything," she said. "You just never cared enough to see who I was." A ripple went through the small crowd forming near them, quiet but unmistakable. Cole opened his mouth again, but a voice behind them cut through the tension. "Ms. Cooper Harrison, the board would like a moment with you." A senior director stood waiting, posture formal, eyes respectful. Respectful. For her. Grant gave her a small nod. "Ready?" She inhaled. "Yes." As she followed the director, the crowd parted for her, including Cole. For the first time, he looked small, and she didn't feel small at all. The senior director led Maddie through a side corridor of the plaza, away from the ballroom's glitter and noise.
The hallway was lined with oil paintings and soft lamps, casting warm light that contrasted with the icy tension building inside her. Grant walked beside her, a quiet anchor in a storm she never meant to create. When they reached a private lounge, the door opened to reveal 6 board members, men and women who controlled billions with a sentence.
entire industries with a signature. They stood when she entered. Stood for her. "Ms. Cooper Harrison," the chairwoman said, extending her hand. "We've been expecting to meet you." Maddie shook her hand, though her fingers trembled slightly. "Please," the chairwoman continued, "have a seat." She sat. Grant sat beside her, a steady presence. No one else spoke yet. The room was too still, too aware of her every breath. Then the chairwoman folded her hands. "We've received word about what happened at Matthews Tech." Maddie's pulse jumped. She'd known this moment was coming, but not tonight, not like this. "You identified the error," the chairwoman continued. "You escalated it properly, and you did so without notifying media, competitors, or investors. That shows integrity." Maddie exhaled slowly. "I didn't want to hurt anyone." "Doing the right thing rarely avoids damage," another board member said. "But it prevents far worse damage in the long run." Another leaned forward. "You handled a scandal with maturity, something many executives twice your age fail to do." Maddie blinked, stunned. "I acted because it was the ethical choice." "And that," the chairwoman said firmly, "is what leadership is." Silence fell. Then a different board member, a sharp woman in a silver dress, shifted her attention to Grant. "Is she ready?" she asked. Grant didn't answer immediately. He looked at Maddie instead. "Tell them," he said softly. Her throat tightened. "Tell them what?" "You know." She didn't, not fully. But she sensed it, felt it, the weight in the air, the way the board looked at her, the way Grant wasn't speaking for her. So she took a breath and trusted her instinct. "I'm not ready," she admitted. "Not for everything you expect of me. Not yet. But I'm learning. I'm working harder than I ever have, and I'm not going to walk away from the responsibility I inherited." She hesitated, just a heartbeat. Then, "I won't let this company fall into the hands of people who care more about power than impact." A slow smile spread across the chairwoman's face. "Then, Ms. Cooper Harrison, we believe you're ready for your next step." Grant finally spoke. "The board has voted, with your presence tonight. The decision becomes official." Maddie stared. "Decision?" The chairwoman rose. "You are now an active, recognized member of the Harrison Executive Council." Her breath vanished. Executive Council. Not intern, not trainee, not potential. Executive. At 28. She stood, stunned, as the board members extended their hands. When she left the room, Grant touched her shoulder gently. "You did that," he said. "Not your name, not your inheritance. You." Maddie felt something shift inside her, subtle, yet seismic. Tonight wasn't just an introduction. It was an arrival. When Maddie and Grant stepped back into the grand ballroom, the atmosphere had shifted, not for the room, but for her. It felt like walking through a doorway only she could see. She wasn't the unsure woman who entered tonight. She wasn't the ghost Cole overlooked. She was an executive council member of Harrison Aviation, and the entire fabric of the evening rearranged around that truth. People watched her differently, not with curiosity now, with recognition. But across the room, someone else was unraveling. Cole stood stiffly near the champagne tower, his expression tight, jaw locked in strained composure. Sienna hovered beside him, chattering anxiously. But Cole wasn't listening. His eyes were locked on Maddie like he was watching the ground disappear beneath him. He began weaving through the crowd,
each step sharper. Maddie felt Grant shift slightly, ready to intercept, but she lifted a hand gently. "No, let him come." She wasn't afraid anymore. Cole stopped a few feet away. His voice was low, tight, shaking with something she'd never seen in him before. Panic. "Maddie, tell me this is some kind of stunt." She met his gaze calmly. "It isn't." "You? An executive? A Harrison?" He laughed, but it was thin, hollow, desperate. "You were shelving books 2 months ago." "Yes," she said simply, "and now I'm here." "That doesn't make sense," he snapped. "Something like this doesn't just happen." Behind her, Grant spoke quietly. "When it's her birthright, it does." Cole's face twitched, his composure cracking. "Do you have any idea what my board is saying right now? They think you flagged the numbers out of spite." Maddie stayed still. "I flagged them because they were wrong." "Because you wanted to embarrass me." "No, Cole," she replied softly. "You did that to yourself." He flinched. A hush spread around them as a small circle formed, guests pretending not to watch, but hanging on every word. Maddie didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You signed off on something you didn't double-check," she said. "You rushed. You always rush.
And people who depend on you deserve better."
"You destroyed my career."
"I protected the truth," she corrected. "If you lose your position, that's because you built it on shortcuts." Sienna placed a cautious hand on Cole's arm.
"Cole, maybe we should step back."
He shook her off. His voice broke. "I just needed more time. I was supposed to present strong numbers for the IPO." "And you presented false ones," Maddie said. "That's not my doing." For the first time, Cole's bravado collapsed completely. His eyes glimmered with humiliation, desperation, maybe even regret. "You were supposed to be on my side," he whispered. Maddie felt a pang, but not for him. For the version of herself who once would have apologized, shouldered the blame, carried his burden. "I was on your side," she said quietly, "until you made it impossible." Cole's shoulders sagged. The defeat was unmistakable. Guests around them murmured, sympathy not for him, but for her. Respect. A shift in power unfolding in real time. Grant touched her back lightly. "The board is waiting for your closing introduction." As she walked away, leaving Cole standing small in a room built for the powerful, one truth settled over her like a steady flame. Justice didn't always roar. Sometimes it arrived quietly. In the exact room where someone once made you feel invisible. Tonight, Maddie wasn't invisible. She was inevitable. The boardroom, set up inside the plaza's executive suite, overlooked the shimmering night skyline, Manhattan glowing like a constellation that refused to dim. As Maddie stepped inside, the room quieted. Conversations paused. Heads turned. It wasn't dramatic. It was recognition. The kind she never thought she would command. Grant walked slightly behind her this time, not leading, letting her lead. The senior director gestured toward the center podium. "Ms. Cooper Harrison, the floor is yours." Her throat tightened for a split second, panic rising like an old reflex. But then she felt the weight of the past weeks, the training, the late nights, the mistakes, the victories, the truth she uncovered, the courage she didn't know she had. It steadied her. She stepped forward. The screen behind her displayed the next phase strategy for Harrison Aviation's sustainability expansion, something she'd been studying relentlessly. The board members leaned forward, curious to hear the voice of the heir who had appeared seemingly out of nowhere and already shifted power dynamics across two corporations. Maddie took a breath. "I won't pretend I grew up understanding any of this," she began, voice steady. "I didn't grow up in boardrooms. I didn't study in elite programs. I stocked shelves.
I paid hospital bills. I survived." A ripple of silence spread across the room.
"But what I do understand," she continued, "is people, pressure, consequence, responsibility. When I saw the projections at Matthews Tech, I didn't run from the truth. I faced it, even though it hurt. And because of that, the company and the industry is adjusting before something far worse happened." Elena watched her with a rare softness. Riker gave a small nod. Grant's expression was calm, proud. "I'm not here tonight because I'm perfect," Maddie said. "I'm here because I don't take shortcuts. That's what my mother taught me. And that's how I intend to lead." She moved through the briefing, slow, confident, prepared. Every point aligned, every answer steady. She didn't rush, didn't shrink, didn't lose herself to fear. And when she finished, she stepped back with a quiet exhale.
The room stayed silent for a heartbeat. Then applause rose, not thunderous, not dramatic, but steady, meaningful, real.
The chairwoman stood. "Ms. Cooper Harrison, you have demonstrated judgment, instinct, and integrity. You will serve as strategic liaison between the Council and our West Coast partners. The final negotiations will take place in San Francisco this week. We'd like you to lead the initial presentation." Maddie stared. "Lead?" "Yes," the chairwoman said. "You've earned it." Grant whispered, "This is huge, Maddie. Massive." She felt lightheaded. "I've never led anything this important." Elena approached, arms crossed but eyes warm. "Then you'll do what you've done since day one. Learn faster than anyone expects." As the board dispersed, congratulating her with rare respect, Maddie drifted toward the window.
Manhattan stretched beneath her like a promise she finally had permission to claim. For the first time, she wasn't stepping into a world that didn't want her. She was stepping into a world that needed her. Behind her, Grant spoke gently. "You ready for San Francisco?" She didn't look away from the view. "I'm ready for everything." And for once, she believed it. The sun was barely rising when the Gulf Stream lifted off towards San Francisco, its engines a low, confident hum beneath Maddie's seat. She sat by the window, watching Manhattan shrink into a patchwork of silver and gold. A city that once swallowed her was now a city she was leaving on her own terms. Not fleeing, not hiding, advancing. Grant sat across from her, reviewing documents for the upcoming negotiations, but every so often he glanced up, like he still couldn't fully believe the woman sitting there was the sister he'd searched for half his life. "You nervous?" he asked. Maddie considered it. The old version of her would have said yes. The girl from Queens would have been nauseated by the responsibility she was flying toward. The woman who once trembled at Cole's disappointment would have curled into herself. But the woman she was now? "A little," she admitted, "but not in a way I used to be." Grant smiled. "Good. Means you're ready." The jet sliced through clouds as the sky turned a deep pink. For a long moment, Maddie allowed herself to breathe. Really breathe. She didn't think about spreadsheets or projections or boardrooms. She thought of her mother, the sacrifice, the silence. the way she hid an entire legacy so her daughter could grow up safe, even if it meant growing up small.
"I wish she could see this,"
Maddie whispered. Grant's voice softened. "She would be proud. Not because of the job, but because you chose yourself." Her eyes stung, but she blinked quickly. She had cried enough in her life. Today was not for tears. When they landed in San Francisco, the air smelled like ocean salt and possibility. The black sedan waiting on the tarmac took them straight to the Harrison Partner Tower overlooking the bay. Employees stood straighter when she passed. Assistants whispered her name. Conference room screens lit up with her title. Strategic Liaison, Madeline Cooper Harrison. No one questioned her place. No one doubted her. And for the first time, neither did she. The negotiations began at noon. Representatives from 2 major aviation firms sat across from her, ready to dominate the conversation. But she didn't shrink. She spoke clearly, confidently, reinforcing points she'd studied until dawn. She asked sharp questions. She requested data. She corrected assumptions. By the end, one of the senior negotiators leaned back and said, "You're not what we expected." Maddie smiled. "I know." When the meeting adjourned, Grant approached her with an expression she'd never seen from him, relief mixed with awe. "You led that room," he said. "I did," she replied softly, almost surprised at her own words. News alerts pinged on his phone. He skimmed one, then looked up. "Matthews Tech has issued a full correction," he said. "Their stock is dropping. Coal is being questioned by the board." Maddie nodded slowly. Not vindictive, just resolved. She didn't wish him ruin. She wished him accountability. There was a difference. As evening fell, Maddie returned to the jet, the sun setting over the bay like a blaze of gold. She stood at the top of the jet's stairs, the wind lifting her hair, the world stretching wide before her. She had survived heartbreak. She had uncovered truth. She had risen in rooms not built for her. And she had rewritten her entire future. Not through revenge, but through becoming someone she could finally be proud of. As she stepped inside the jet, Grant called from behind her. "Ready to head home?" Maddie looked out at the glowing horizon. "No," she said with a soft, powerful smile. "I'm ready to keep going." Tonight, the sky wasn't a limit. It was hers. So, that's where our story comes to an end. And if you, my wonderful friend, are still here with me at this moment, it means something inside this journey touched your heart in a quiet, honest way. Maybe you saw a part of yourself in Maddie. The struggle, the doubts, the moments you felt small, the nights you carried more than anyone knew. But here's the lesson life keeps whispering to us. The same message the Stoics spoke thousands of years ago. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Real strength begins within. Marcus Aurelius said that, but maybe tonight, it feels like he said it just for you. Maddie didn't rise because life was kind to her. She rose because she stopped shrinking, because she chose truth over fear, because she finally believed she deserved better. And you know what? So do you. No matter where you're starting from, your story can shift in ways you never imagined. Healing is slow, growth is uncomfortable, but becoming is beautiful. If this story gave you courage, comfort, or just one moment of clarity, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. It helps us tell more stories that speak to the heart, including yours. We're in this together.